My sister banned me from her wedding for being unsuccessful, until Marine One arrived. We have standards. My sister texted me 3 weeks before her wedding. You're not welcome. I stared at the message while standing in the Pentagon's National Military Command Center, surrounded by screens showing real-time satellite feeds from 6 different conflict zones. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was monitoring situations that could affect millions of lives, but I wasn't good enough to attend Madison's wedding to a hedge fund manager. The text continued. Bradley's family are very particular about appearances. You understand. That bartending job and living in that studio apartment, it wouldn't reflect well on us. Bartending job. Studio apartment. That's what my family thought of my life. The bartending job was my cover for the officers' club at Fort McNair, where I occasionally helped out to maintain my cover story. The studio apartment was actually a high-security residence in Arlington that happened to be small because I was never there. I spent most nights at the Pentagon or deployed overseas. But Madison didn't know any of that. None of my family did. I typed back a simple understood, and returned to the crisis unfolding in the South China Sea. 3 carrier groups were converging on disputed waters, and the Joint Chiefs needed my assessment within the hour. My sister's wedding standards would have to wait. The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of strategic planning sessions and classified briefings. The situation in the Pacific was deteriorating faster than anyone anticipated. I was working 20-hour days, catching naps in my office, living on coffee and sheer determination. 2 nights before Madison's wedding, I was in the Situation Room with the Secretary of Defense when my mother called. I let it go to voicemail. Emma, I know Madison uninvited you, but I wanted you to know we're not trying to be cruel. It's just, Bradley's family owns Hampton Industries. They're expecting a certain caliber of guest. Your father agrees it's for the best. Maybe once you get your life together, find a real career. I deleted the message and went back to reviewing strike packages for potential military responses. My real career at that moment involved preventing World War III. But sure, Mom, I'll work on getting my life together. The wedding day arrived, a perfect Saturday in October at the Chevy Chase Club, Maryland's most exclusive golf course. I knew because I'd seen the invitation Madison had posted on Instagram, making sure to tag everyone who was invited. The passive-aggressive exclusion wasn't lost on me. I wasn't planning to go. I was supposed to be in a bunker at Site R, the emergency Pentagon facility, monitoring the Pacific situation. But at 1:47 p.m., everything changed. My secure phone rang with the tone reserved for one person only. General Foster. The president's voice was tense. I need you at Camp David immediately. The Chinese have responded to our ultimatum. I want you to brief the Security Council via secure link. Sir, I'm at Site R. I can be there in. Marine One is already en route to your location. You have full authority to use whatever transport necessary after Camp David. This is priority 1. I acknowledged and gathered my materials. 20 minutes later, I was in the familiar cabin of Marine One, reviewing classified documents as we flew toward Camp David. The Chinese response was more aggressive than anticipated. They'd moved their own carrier groups and were threatening to close shipping lanes. The briefing at Camp David took 2 hours. The President, Secretary of State, and National Security Advisor peppered me with questions about military options, escalation scenarios, and probable outcomes. By the time we finished, it was 4:30 p.m. General Foster, the President said as the briefing concluded, outstanding work. Where do you need to be next? Back to the Pentagon, sir. My team is monitoring. He checked his watch. Take Marine One. The pilot can drop you at the Pentagon helipad. As I boarded the helicopter, the crew chief approached. General, there's been a slight route modification. We have to avoid some restricted airspace due to a civilian event. We'll be passing over Chevy Chase Club. My stomach dropped. Madison's wedding. How low? I asked. We'll need to decrease altitude over that area due to traffic patterns from Reagan National. Maybe 500 feet. I did the math. Marine One, the President's helicopter, would be passing directly over my sister's outdoor wedding ceremony at roughly 5 p.m., prime ceremony time, at an altitude where everyone would see and hear it. Part of me wanted to ask them to change the route. The other part, the part that had been uninvited for being unsuccessful, said nothing. At 5:03 p.m., Marine One descended to 500 feet over the Chevy Chase Club. From the window, I could see the wedding below, white chairs in perfect rows, an altar decorated with what had to be $50,000 worth of flowers, and 300 guests in their finest attire. The ceremony was in progress. I could actually see Madison in her dress, Bradley beside her, the officiant between them. Then the sound of our rotors hit them. The thundering of Marine One's engines shattered the genteel atmosphere like a sledgehammer through China. Flower arrangements toppled. Women grabbed their hats. The string quartet's music stands flew across the lawn. The officiant's words were drowned in the roar of military-grade turbines. Every single guest looked up. Marine One is unmistakable. The distinctive white top, the American flag on the side, the words United States of America emblazoned on the fuselage. This wasn't just any helicopter. This was the helicopter, the one that carried the president. We were descending. The pilot's voice crackled through the intercom. "General, we have a mechanical warning light. Protocol requires immediate landing for inspection. The golf course is our safest option." I wanted to argue, to tell them to push through to the Pentagon, but you don't argue with Marine One protocols. The president's helicopter doesn't take chances. We set down on the 18th fairway, 200 yards from the wedding ceremony. The entire wedding party stood frozen, watching as the most famous helicopter in America sat on their manicured grass, rotors slowly spinning down. Then the door opened, and the crew chief stepped out in full Marine dress blues. He turned back toward the cabin and announced in a parade ground voice that carried across the entire golf course, "We're here for Brigadier General Foster." I stepped out in my service dress uniform, the one I'd worn to brief the president, complete with ribbons, badges, and the single star of a brigadier general. My hair was pulled back in a tight bun, my shoes polished to a mirror shine. The groom, Bradley, the hedge fund prince with the important family, fainted. Just crumpled like a paper bag, taking down 2 groomsmen as he fell. Madison stood at the altar, her mouth open, her bouquet hanging limply at her side. Our parents were in the front row. My father had half risen from his chair, his face cycling through confusion, recognition, and shock. My mother was gripping his arm, her carefully styled hair whipping in the residual rotor wash. I walked across the grass toward them, my aide Major Harrison falling in step beside me with my briefcase. The wedding guests parted like the Red Sea. Some had their phones out, recording. Others stood in stunned silence. A child's voice piped up, "Mommy, is she important?" Her mother's response carried in the sudden quiet, "Very important, sweetie." I stopped at the edge of the ceremony space, maintaining military bearing. Madison finally found her voice. "Emma, what? How? This is some kind of joke, right?" Major Harrison stepped forward. Brigadier General Foster is the Deputy Director of Strategic Planning for the Joint Chiefs of Staff. She's needed at the Pentagon immediately for a developing situation in the Pacific." My mother's voice was barely a whisper. "General." "Brigadier General," I confirmed, my voice carrying the authority I'd learned to project in rooms full of admirals and cabinet secretaries. Promoted 8 months ago. Youngest female flag officer in the Army's current roster. Bradley had been revived and was now sitting on the ground, his groomsmen fanning him with their programs. He looked up at me with glazed eyes. "You're Madison's loser sister." "The bartender." "I'm Madison's sister," I agreed. The bartender's story was a cover for security purposes. My actual job involves managing strategic military operations for the Indo-Pacific region. I report directly to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs and brief the president twice a week. Madison's maid of honor, our cousin Stephanie, who'd joined in mocking my pathetic life at every family gathering, asked weakly, "Brief the president." "I just came from Camp David," I said simply. "The situation in the South China Sea requires immediate attention. I apologize for the interruption to your ceremony." I turned to Madison. My sister, the one who'd made me feel small for so many years, who'd texted me 3 weeks ago that I wasn't good enough for her standards. "Congratulations on your wedding," I said formally. "I hope you and Bradley are very happy together." Madison tried to speak, but only managed, "Emma, we didn't know." "No," I said calmly. "You didn't know because you never asked. You saw someone working a part-time job and living in a small apartment and decided that meant failure. You never asked why someone with a master's degree from Georgetown spent her evenings serving drinks. You never wondered about the unexplained absences or the calls I couldn't take." My father finally stood fully. "Emma, surely you can stay." "I can't," I cut him off, checking my watch. "There are 3 carrier groups in the South China Sea waiting for my assessment. The Joint Chiefs will reconvene in 90 minutes. Whatever family gathering this is, it's not more important than preventing armed conflict." The crew chief called out, "General, We're cleared for departure. I nodded and started to turn away, then stopped. The entire wedding was watching. 300 of Maryland's elite, Bradley's important family, all the people Madison had wanted to impress with her standards. Madison, I said, loud enough for everyone to hear, you were right about one thing. We do have different standards. Mine involve serving something larger than myself. Yours involve impressing people who measure worth by portfolio size. I looked at Bradley's family clustered near the bar, their expressions ranging from shock to embarrassment. Mr. and Mrs. Hampton, I've read your company's file. You have several defense contracts with the Pentagon. I suspect you know exactly what a one-star general represents in terms of influence and access. The bartender you were too good to have at your family event signs off on strategic assessments that affect those contracts. Bradley's mother went pale. I turned and walked back to Marine One, Major Harrison beside me. Behind us, the wedding had devolved into chaos. Guests were Googling my name, finding the sparse public records that existed, testimony to Congress, a photo with the Secretary of Defense, my change of command ceremony. As I reached the helicopter, Stephanie ran after us, her bridesmaid dress hiked up, heels sinking into the grass. Emma, wait, we didn't mean. The Marine guards stepped forward, blocking her approach. Please maintain distance from the aircraft. She's my cousin. Stephanie protested. She's a general officer of the United States Army, the Marine replied flatly. Step back. As Marine One lifted off, I looked down at the ruins of Madison's perfect wedding. The altar was askew, flowers scattered everywhere, guests standing in confused clusters instead of neat rows. Madison stood alone at the altar. Bradley was being attended to by paramedics, apparently having fainted again. Major Harrison handed me the tablet with updated intelligence from the Pacific. General, the Chinese fleet has altered course. Appears to be a de-escalation. Good, I said, already focusing on the data. Get me Admiral Ricketts on the secure line. We need to adjust our response accordingly. As we flew toward the Pentagon, my phone, my personal one, exploded with messages. Texts from relatives I hadn't heard from in years. Voicemails from my mother crying. Madison calling over and over. I handed the phone to Harrison. Hold on to this until we resolve the Pacific situation. Your family. My family uninvited me from a wedding because I wasn't successful enough. They made their priorities clear. Mine is preventing a war. 2 hours later, in the Pentagon's command center, we successfully negotiated a mutual withdrawal of forces from the disputed area. The crisis passed without a shot fired, though the public would never know how close we'd come. At midnight, after the last briefing concluded, Harrison returned my phone. 147 missed calls. 200 text messages. The last one from Madison. The wedding was ruined after you left. Bradley's family is mortified. They had no idea they'd insulted a general. Please call me. I typed back a single response. You said you had standards. So do I. Mine just happened to involve something more important than impressing your in-laws. Then I blocked her number. 6 months later, I heard through extended family that Madison and Bradley had divorced. Apparently, the humiliation of fainting twice when meeting his wife's unsuccessful sister, who turned out to outrank everyone they knew, had been too much for his ego to handle. Madison had tried repeatedly to reach out through various channels, claiming she wanted to apologize, to understand, to reconnect. But some bridges, once burned by snobbery and judgment, don't deserve rebuilding. She'd shown me exactly what her standards were, what she valued, who she thought deserved to be at her perfect wedding. Turned out her perfect wedding became famous anyway. Videos of Marine One landing and a female general stepping out went viral. Bride bans sister from wedding. Sister arrives in president's helicopter became a meme. I never responded to any of Madison's attempts to contact me. I was too busy maintaining my actual standards, the ones that involved protecting the country that gave her the freedom to have her precious standards in the first place. Some people measure success in money and social status. Others measure it in service and sacrifice. Madison chose her metrics. I chose mine. And when history needed someone to help prevent a war, it wasn't the hedge fund prince or his important family who answered the call. It was the unsuccessful bartender in Marine One.